to social networks, people from all walks of life have managed to gather millions of followers. What they say and what they do is tweeted, shared and uploaded 24/7, gaining worldwide reach. But long before the internet existed, there were people who changed and influenced individuals, the masses, science, government, and even the course of humanity. Their messages and deeds went viral without the need for hashtags, memes, or posts.
So that's what makes them extraordinary. It's not that they're telling stories, it's that they're being an extraordinary story.
But what was it about these people and their lives, work and achievements that they, without the social platforms we take for granted today, became history's ultimate influencers?
I have a dream.
Many see gender, social and political barriers as limits, but for some, they're challenges to be overcome. These are the individuals who conquer hardship, make a name for themselves, and change the course of history. In this episode, we'll examine the life of Marie Curie, Eva Peron, and Muhammad Ali. They broke barriers against the odds and reached goals that no one else in similar circumstances could even have imagined.
These people are these kind of perfect heroes, so I think that's why they become so famous, because they are just incredible ideals of self.
At the beginning of the 20th century, science was almost exclusively a man's domain. But this was about to change. One timid woman would gain worldwide recognition for her multiple contributions to the field: Marie Curie.
Marie Curie was really one of a tiny handful in the world of women achieving anything in science. That broke barriers and made her a role model for women aspiring to the sciences.
The youngest of 5 siblings, Marie Skłodowska was born in November 1867 in Warsaw, now the capital of Poland, but back then under Russian control.
Her father was a physics professor, and he encouraged all of his daughters to be highly educated and to be ambitious, intellectually ambitious.
Her mother was also a teacher, but when Marie was only 10 years old, she died, devastating the family. Young Marie was extremely analytical, a prodigy in literature and mathematics. She went to boarding school and then to the gymnasium, a learning institution comparable to high school. Although it prepared students for university, for Marie, that wouldn't be an option.
It was basically the end for a woman in terms of higher education in Poland. They were simply not allowed to go to university.
Marie wanted to continue studying, and with the help of one of her older sisters, at 24 years old, she managed to enter the leading university in Paris, the Sorbonne, where she became the first woman to obtain a degree in physics in 1893. Marie's logical mindset and ambition for pure scientific achievement meant she was destined for a life dedicated to discovery. She was very reserved and very serious, yet due to the times in which she lived, the nuances of her personality would remain a mystery.
It's very difficult to know what Marie Curie's personality was like, actually. She doesn't give much away, and the archives that we have after her are quite micromanaged in the sense that she was probably very careful to burn or delete or whatever material she didn't want us to see.
In Paris, she met a French physicist who'd been studying crystals and magnetism. He was the laboratory chief at the Municipal School of Industrial Physics and Chemistry, Pierre Curie.
Pierre Curie had quite a lot of similarity in his life compared to Marie. So as Marie, she received quite a lot of education at home. The mother and father were teachers as well. He had a very brilliant mind.
Marie's drive and intelligence won over Pierre, who soon proposed to her, and they married in 1895. Marie became a French citizen and adopted her husband's surname, becoming Marie Curie, a name engraved in science history. The new couple devoted themselves to study and research. Pierre was already known in the academic world.
She became his helper. That's not a good word, but that's the way it was sometimes depicted in media. As a married French woman, she didn't have any property rights whatsoever, not physical property, not intellectual property. He owned everything.
While Pierre received a moderate allowance for his work, Marie worked for nothing. Although they were not poor, they had a modest life that soon was crowned by two daughters, Irene and Eve. Their research followed the discoveries of another French physicist, Antoine Becquerel, who'd found strange emanations in uranium. But Marie revolutionarily proposed that the emitted energy came from the uranium atoms and went on to study how to prove her theory. In 1898, the Curies identified a new element, polonium, which they named after Marie's country of origin, Poland. Later that year, the couple also discovered radium. That was the beginning of a new area of study, radioactivity, and the base for the birth of nuclear physics itself. In 1903, Pierre, but not Marie, was nominated for the Nobel Prize for their research into radioactivity. The organization was not yet ready to recognize a woman for her achievements.
It's her husband who fought the Nobel Committee to say, I'm not accepting this prize if she's not accepting this prize because she did every bit as much, if not more, work than I did. That would be wrong.
Pierre finally convinced them and opened the door for Marie's ultimate validation in the field. Both Marie and Pierre, together with Becquerel, won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1903. This put them on the scientific radar of the whole world, and they began to attract media attention.
Media is like starstruck. They think it's just amazing with this young couple who have small children and who work together. And so they are definitely celebrity material, if you will, very early on.
In the beginning of the 20th century, newspapers were the most important mass media, and appearing in them signified being in the spotlight of society. But though Marie was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, it was Pierre who was given a full place to teach at the Sorbonne. Women were still not accepted as teachers by the institution. However, in 1906, tragedy struck the Curies. While Pierre was crossing the street on a rainy day, he slipped, fell under a carriage, and died on the spot. Marie was distraught.
She was strongly depressed. The death of Pierre brought back, of course, the memory of the death of the mother and the death of the sister. But finally, she found the strength inside her, but it took months and months.
In the midst of her grief over her husband's death, by a twist of fate, Marie's intellect was finally recognized by the Sorbonne. And Marie took Pierre's place, becoming the first woman to teach there. Her hundreds of students, her fellow professors, and the fact she was part of such a reputed academy gave her notoriety and exposure in the media. But in 1911, controversy made her known by many more people than before, and not because of her research. Marie's love letters, addressed to the physicist and former student of Pierre's, Paul Langevin, were published in the newspapers.
Paul was married, and Marie was known by everybody, was an important figure in science and in society. So it was quite clear that there was an affair between them reading this letter.
Unlike today, where kiss and tell stories amongst celebrities are commonplace across social media, for Marie, this was seen as a big scandal, and her image was hugely damaged. Despite this, in the same year of 1911, Marie went on to win her second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry.
So not only she was the first woman to have a Nobel Prize, she is the only woman that received 2 Nobel Prizes. That is absolutely exceptional.
Feeling that her negative publicity might overshadow her achievement, she considered not traveling to Sweden to collect her award. But the support she received from one of the most famous scientists of all time gave her the boost she needed. Marie received a letter from Albert Einstein, outraged at the way she was being treated by the press, and he encouraged her to go. Although Marie Curie was still reeling from the scandal revelation, she was, in her words, bruised but defiant, and went to Sweden to receive the Nobel Prize. But the stress caused by the scandal, alongside using radioactive material during her experiments, began to take its toll on her health. That year, she fell ill. After a long convalescence, Marie got better. And like many scandals, hers quickly became yesterday's news, and she could continue with her scientific work, especially in the research into the treatment of cancer. However, in an ironic twist of fate, the radium that she'd discovered became an expensive commodity that cost $100,000 a gram. Marie didn't have the money or resources to buy any to continue with her studies. But a New York journalist knew her story and came to her aid. Missy Maloney was the media-savvy expert Marie didn't realize she needed. Maloney wrote about Marie's achievements in an American magazine and helped spread her fame across the Atlantic. But even more importantly, when Missy discovered the problems Marie was having in continuing her research, she felt compelled to help such an important woman carry on with her invaluable contribution to science.
So then she comes up with this idea, which today would be something like a crowdfunding scheme. And she says to Curie, well, if I can get the women of America to give you the cost to buy 1 gram of radium, will you come to the US and accept this gift? And of course, Curie hates to travel. She doesn't want to go anywhere. And she probably thinks, well, this is never going to happen. So, what should I do? Of course, I'll say yes.
Marie Curie was a woman of science with a cold demeanor who hated social events and being in the limelight. Missy knew that this was not the best image to attract donations, so she decided to soften the image of the scientist to Americans, depicting Marie as a poor and altruistic scientist wishing to treat cancer through her research.
Maloney has this enormous will to do something, and she manages to launch this campaign. And hey presto, suddenly they have $100,000. So they can buy a gram of radium for Curie. So she has to come to the US.
Maloney invited Marie to the United States in 1921 to receive the radium from President Warren G. Harding himself. who praised Curie for her great achievements in the realms of science and intellect.
So she travels to the US with her 2 daughters for a 6-week-long tour. And the tour is exhausting. If you look at the program, what she did on those 6 weeks, she traveled across the country, she lectured, she went to cocktail parties, all of it. Some things she probably hated.
Marie received various honorary doctorates in the US, and her visit was widely reported by the newspapers of the time, giving her notoriety in a country where she was not yet well known. In the United States alone, more than 39 million people read daily newspapers in the first decades of the 20th century, and as she toured across multiple cities, the US visit increased her popularity.
But if you're talking about really something that helps create the idea of what Marie Curie is and her legacy for the future, then I would say that it's extremely tied to these events, the newspaper stories, the lectures, the tours that she does in the US. So I think the US is this key site in a sense where she really takes off, shaping her as an international celebrity.
Thanks to the gift of radium and with her newfound global celebrity status, Marie returned to Paris and kept working in her laboratory. But her research was making her more sick. Without her knowing it, she was poisoning herself with the radiation. She didn't stop working until her death in 1934 from aplastic anemia, a condition that occurs when your body stops producing enough new blood cells. Today, it's clear that the experiments that brought her so much glory also affected her health.
She broke barriers that, frankly, no men had done. She wasn't looking for fame, but fame found her because the discoveries were also not obscure. They were life-changing for the times.
To this day, Marie Curie is the only person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in different fields. Her achievements were the source of inspiration for so many men and, above all, women who followed her footsteps into the world of science.
It was so unusual and barrier-breaking for a woman not to have the curiosity and intelligence to make the scientific discovery, but to find a way to be allowed in the door to do it.
Although she had a rocky relationship with the media, it was her personal fulfillments that made her a legend. She was the source of significant scientific research even after her death, and her groundbreaking achievements have helped to save the lives of millions of people.
The importance of the radioactivity for treatment of illnesses, for diagnostic, is an incredible legacy, and a lot comes from the discovery of Marie.
Her ingenuity and incredible strength allowed Marie Curie to go down in history as the most recognized female scientist of all time. Since childhood, she felt she had something important to say to others, but no one suspected that this girl of humble origins would become one of the greatest legends of her country, still recognized around the world today, 70 years after her death. Eva Peron, Evita.
She was one of the very first women in the 20th century who is going to ambition to have such a public role, and she did. And so in many ways opened the way to other women later on.
Born Maria Eva Duarte in the small town of Los Toldos in Argentina in 1919, was the youngest of 5 siblings.
She was born with 3 strikes against her, really. She was poor, she was illegitimate, and she was a woman.
But Eva's ambitions were big. At just 15 years old, she moved to the capital, Buenos Aires.
She wanted to be a film star, which is not uncommon for teenage girls then or now. It was seen as a plausible way out of poverty.
Eva's passionate character was a key ingredient to her future success. She was truly eloquent. She had a temper, but also sensibility. Eva started her acting career in theatre. Later, she got several small roles in movies, but it was another platform that led her into the homes of Argentinians, the radio.
She was a reasonably well-known radio actress. She did soap operas and she got her picture in the fan magazines quite a bit. She wasn't a great star, but she was well-known.
Radio was the biggest media in Argentina. It was a very, very popular medium. In fact, Argentina ranked third behind the United States and Great Britain in terms of the number of radio receivers.
Television wasn't around yet, and as for the press, many people were illiterate. Back then, radio was the way most Argentinians received their news and entertainment. In 1943, a coup d'etat established a military dictatorship in Argentina. Among the group involved in the coup was Colonel Juan Domingo Perón.
And it is within that military government that he's going to begin to build his power. He's going to first use a position as in the Secretary of Labor to build his relations with the trade union leaders, envisioning a new role for the working class in the future.
He created his own agenda called the Peronist movement, aimed at introducing social measures to help Argentina's fast-growing class of urban industrial workers and gain popularity amongst them. In January 1944, an earthquake struck the country. In Buenos Aires, efforts to help those affected were led by Colonel Perón, and during a charity event, he met Eva Duarte.
What you have is a rising political star who's likely to be a presidential candidate and likely to win, at the same time that you have one of the best known sort of voices and faces of Argentine radio.
A secret relationship unfolded, which the couple made public months later. And as is the case with famous power couples, the public was divided. They were both adored, but also harshly criticized. Anyone who didn't know Eva from the radio now knew her as the Colonel's lover. In the midst of the media's scrutiny, Eva continued to do radio and films, but became increasingly involved in the political activities of her partner.
And it's very difficult to find somebody else at that time, the 1940s in Argentina, for that matter throughout Latin America, who actually entered politics in such a fast way by capitalizing on the fact that he had a prominent presence in the media.
In 1945, the opposition to the regime radicalized, and Perón's influence and popularity became too much for his rivals within the government. Soon, conspiracies began to take place in the barracks to undermine his power. His enemies managed to arrest him, but hundreds of thousands of workers, who later started to identify themselves as Peronists, went to the streets demanding his release.
He also has important influential positions to influence members of the military once the government sees this massive demonstration, and after that they're going to call for elections.
As soon as he was released, Eva and Juan Domingo got married, and his candidacy was launched.
She helped him campaign for the presidential election of 1946 using the radio extensively for the very first time. So her past as a radio actress will help them both to begin to utilize the radio to spread their message.
Today, the impact of this media-friendly and popular couple would have surely reached a larger audience through social media. Between them, the Twitter accounts of former US President Barack Obama and his wife Michelle, for example, have more than 120 million followers. But even though they didn't have the social media juggernauts available to today's politicians, at that time, with the massive scope of radio, the Perón strategy paid off. To further appeal to the working classes, she asked them to call her Evita, meaning Little Eva.
Evita became an asset to Perón because Perón is cultivating the working class, and Evita has very humble origins, so she could portray herself as one of them, somebody who has been poor, so she can build this emotional link between the working class and the new leadership.
With the support of the working classes, Perón won the presidency in 1946 with over 53% of the popular vote. Eva had gone from a small town to the balcony of Argentina's presidential residence, and in a total break from the tradition as the president's wife, she gave passionate speeches expressing her concern for the underprivileged.
It really revolutionized the role of a first lady in addressing directly the people, and Perón will give her that space as well.
This First Lady was different from the elite that used to rule the country, and she became a symbol of overcoming difficulty for millions. Combining Evita's followers from the radio and the president's fan base, she became one of the most popular personalities in the whole country.
Of course, she had a very telegenic presence, but I think that particularly the way that she was able to give long speeches in some ways showed the training that she already had as a radio actress.
But this First Lady didn't stop at making speeches. Never seen before in Argentinian politics, she took on an unofficial role in her husband's administration, taking responsibility for health, labor, and government aid. She was jumping from entertainment to politics decades before personalities such as Ronald Reagan, Clint Eastwood, and Arnold Schwarzenegger ever did. Her fame expanded in 1947 during her Rainbow Tour, a title the media gave to the couple's visit to Europe. Hoping to generate new ties with the continent after the Second World War, she was welcomed in style by General Franco in Spain. She even had an audience with the Pope.
That trip was basically a very important moment in which it was clear that Eva Peron was not just able to conquer Argentines, but also had enough aura, enough power in order to charm people from around the world.
Eva was now worldly recognized. She became the first Argentine to appear on the cover of Time magazine, which reported in every detail what she said, what she did, even what she wore, increasing her fame in the United States. However, it was the domestic stage which was the most important to her, and in 1947, she secured the rights that would allow women to vote in elections for the first time, giving a voice to millions of women who'd never been heard before.
Yes, there were voting rights movements before Eva Peron, but it's very difficult to think that that movement that started decades before Eva and Juan Perón came to power would have passed at that time. Eva Peron, through her support behind the women's right to vote, became effective for Perón's re-election a few years later.
The following year, in 1948, she created the Eva Peron Foundation, an organization that, with her at the forefront, built hospitals, homes for single women, and institutions for the elderly and orphans, creating thousands of jobs.
Is going to also propel her as the helper of the needed. So it had a tremendous amount of work that it was done through the Fundación. And of course, it was Peronized or Eviticized, so everything was Evita who's providing this to the people. And that, again, had to create this link.
What she did with it thereafter was quite remarkable. She took it upon herself to organize a women's Peronist party, which was separate from the men's and which she was the sole leader of.
The Peronist Women's Party became the biggest women's organization in the region, and for the first time, women were elected as deputies and senators.
Evita became the champion of women's political rights in the sense of allowing them to vote, but also to become elected.
Female participation was overwhelming in the 1951 elections. More than 90% of those registered turned out to vote. As a result, more than 3.5 million women voted for the first time in Argentina. And this time, Perón won with more than 4.7 million votes, more than 60% of the total. For the very first time, thanks to the Peronist Women's Party, a total of 109 women were elected into the government.
It was a big change in women's public role. I think previously women haven't really been supposed to have a public role beyond possibly organizing some charity work around the church. This was the first time women were really brought into the political process and into public life.
With Perón elected for a second term in office, Evita's influence and power base were now greater than ever.
She was going to be the vice presidential candidate for Perón for his re-election.
But tragedy struck.
But at that time, she became extremely sick.
She was diagnosed with advanced uterine cancer. There was nothing doctors could do for her.
Her last appearance was when Perón was inaugurated for the second time, about 6 weeks before she died, and she really did look like a corpse. She only weighed about 30 kilos, and she had to be propped up in order to keep her standing during the ceremony.
At only 33 years of age, Eva Peron died.
The end came for Evita Perón on the evening of July 26, 1952. Argentina was shocked into mourning. Over 700,000 of the faithful made a pilgrimage to her bier in Buenos Aires. Special food kitchens had to be set up to feed the masses who flocked to the capital city for the memorial services. Death had ended the career of unquestionably one of the most powerful women of the 20th century.
So even though she never had a formal position in government, they prepared a state funeral. Initially it was going to last only 3 days. That was what they prepared for. It actually lasted 15 days because the people demanded to see Evita.
The funeral procession was followed by more than 2 million people, and her followers lined up for hours just to see her coffin. After her death, Eva Peron became a legend. Books, films, and musicals were made about her life and work, spreading her fame throughout the world and allowing millions to learn her story.
She became this globalized myth. She really has become immortal.
She was a major figure in Argentine history. She's probably still the most powerful woman that Latin America has ever seen.
She's breaking all kinds of barriers for women in terms of what it meant to be a woman, particularly in public, both as an actress as well as a political figure.
There's no doubt her legacy and lasting influence has paved the way for more women having the courage to enter the world of politics, not only in Argentina, but across the whole planet. In the ring, he floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee. But his fighting transcended sports. Muhammad Ali fought for everything he believed, becoming one of the biggest celebrities of all time.
He was on a plinth. He was somebody who was on Mount Olympus, not just for African Americans or black people in the world, but white people too looked up to him.
On the 17th of January, 1942, Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. was born into a middle-class home.
But because he was born black in Louisville, Kentucky, he was considered part of a social underclass, and it was a very hard road to travel.
The young Cassius had something special and wouldn't be defeated by prejudice.
He wanted to be acknowledged and in the center and be special. That seemed evident since he was a young child, since he started clowning and entertaining as a very young kid. He wanted to be noticed.
Introduced to boxing at 12, Cassius's career soon took off like a hook to the jaw. At just 18, he won the gold medal in the 1960 Rome Olympics, immediately making him famous in the United States.
The media loved him. I mean, here was this charismatic, articulate, attractive, verbal 18-year-old kid who was so much fun.
In that sense, he was an entertainer in addition to being a boxer.
At the age of 22, underdog Clay won his first World Heavyweight Championship, defeating the intimidating Sonny Liston, who'd won his previous 29 bouts.
I am the greatest.
Cassius Clay's name was now on everyone's lips, but soon they would have to remember a new one. Shortly after winning, he shocked the world by announcing that he had converted to Islam, joining the African American movement and an organization started in the 1930s called the Nation of Islam.
The belief within the nation was that the Americanized names they'd been given were slave names. Cassius Clay's name had come from a slave owner named Cassius Clay, who had undoubtedly owned slaves a century earlier. And so people took on new names.
He changed his name because he wanted to announce to the world that he didn't feel part of the society, the white society, that made him.
The name given by his mentor at the Nation of Islam was Muhammad Ali. The media had a field day, often refusing to call Ali by his new name.
Cassius, you know my new name. Why keep calling me that?
And a lot of people felt fearful. What did this mean? So now you've got this man who is the heavyweight champion of the world and could probably, kill people in a ring. And he's part of this mysterious movement that maybe seems scary to some people, but it kept people very curious and very interested.
Controversy sells. Journalists and Ali knew it. So it's not surprising that he began appearing in the media more frequently.
Well, the very nature of boxing is seeking controversy, right? It is fighting another person. And I think his whole personality exuded a lot of pursuit of controversy. In the ring, out of the ring, and he was looking always for the opportunity to be the victor, whether it was in the ring or, in his religious beliefs, in his political pursuit.
Ali always expressed what he felt. He referred to himself as being black, confident, and cocky, and America should get used to it.
I'm the prettiest sight in the ring today. That's my lady.
Every time he looked in the mirror and said, "I'm so pretty," what he was really saying before it became fashionable was, "Black is beautiful." And in doing that, he made millions of people, maybe hundreds of millions of people all over the world proud of who they were.
A lot of his style was about provocation, provoking people to feel something intensely about him. The sort of all PR is good PR.
But a lot of more thoughtful people realized that he wasn't just talking about vacuous things. He was talking about how whole categories of races in American society were treated as inferior.
Ali was greatly influenced by the teachings of the Nation of Islam, which combined elements of traditional Islam with black nationalist ideas. Through the Nation, he met Muslim minister and civil rights activist Malcolm X. They became good friends and started to appear in the media together at the beginning of the 60s. Together, these two political sparring partners had an enormous influence on the civil rights movement in the United States, appealing to a wide and diverse audience. Boxing fans, black people all over the world, followers of Islam and supporters of Malcolm X. All followed this pair of icons in the media closely. Their fan base only grew.
Hope, and there is hope for change in America, where
All people are not alike.
While Ali remained undefeated in the ring, in 1967, he faced one of his most defining struggles. When he was called to fight in the Vietnam War, he refused.
My intention is to box to win a clean fight. But in war, the intention is to kill, 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 and continue killing innocent people.
The news far transcended boxing, shaking American politics and religion. Many thought it offensive, not only the refusal, but the way he did so with such brazenness.
Under no conditions do we take part in wars to take lives of other humans.
Ali went from being a celebrated champion to one of the most hated people in the country. Although today public figures have to apologize for a lot less at the risk of being cancelled, the backlash against Ali was extreme.
He was indicted. He was stripped of his championship. He was not allowed to fight for more than 3 years. So he sacrificed a great deal.
Ali spent the years that should have been the climax of his career out of the ring and into the courtroom.
The two defining moral issues of the 1960s, if you will, were the war in Vietnam and the civil rights movement. Ali was at the vortex of both of them, but Ali was at the center of most things that mattered. He really was, and that controversy led to his being ingrained in the fabric of America.
Ali became one of the leading figures of the anti-war and Black Power movements, but also a symbol of rebellion, dissent, and counterculture. He was no ordinary sportsman. He got involved in topics that made his popularity exceed the ring.
That controversy that he caused was important to educating a lot of people, including myself, about issues that were important.
But as the protest movement against the Vietnam War grew, Ali's voice became just one of thousands. In 1970, he could now let his boxing do the talking, as he was finally allowed back into the ring. In 1974, he defeated George Foreman spectacularly, winning his second world heavyweight crown in the famous Rumble in the Jungle, one of the greatest sporting events of the 20th century.
It was the classic fairy tale of a young prince unfairly deprived of his throne, coming back to reclaim the crown. It was a wonderful, feel-good story, unless you were a George Foreman fan.
The fight took place in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It was the most watched sporting event on TV of its time, with 1 billion viewers worldwide, contributing to the champion's fame all over the world.
He was one of the first person to grow up with television. So television became like a schoolroom in order for him to play the part of a celebrity.
The effect of television on the viewers was unprecedented.
You begin to develop intense attachments to someone you simply see on television. And this began with the rise of television in the late 50s. There was no parallel before. So television was the key to modern celebrity.
Ali was all over the media. He had a unique way of talking to the press. He rubbed shoulders with Elvis and the Beatles, and even starred on Broadway. Everyone wanted to be with him. He would probably be one of the most tagged people in celebrities' posts today.
He was the king of athletes, plain and simple, in his time. You could have taken any celebrity from that era, people like, Diana Ross, actors, politicians. They all wanted to be seen with Muhammad, not the other way around.
Ali used every platform at his disposal to get his message across and become a worldwide celebrity.
He really was his own PR manager, he really had an ability to draw people in and, sort of, it's hard to say what that charisma is made up of, but clearly he was very engaging.
4 years later, in 1978, Muhammad Ali, already a legend, became the only boxer to win 3 world heavyweight titles. This fight also broke audience records, as it was watched by 2 billion viewers in some 80 countries. Soon after, in 1981, Ali retired. And 3 years later, he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, a brain disorder that causes unintended or uncontrollable movements. The sport he loved was now going to be the death of him.
In Ali's case, those brain cells were destroyed by repeated blows to the head. There was other brain damage as well. It was irreversible. It was progressive. And it's something that afflicts many fighters, many football players here in the United States.
For 32 years, he would face his greatest personal struggle, becoming an icon of resilience and hope. His efforts even helped perfect treatments for Parkinson's disease.
He had tremendous resilience to keep bouncing back no matter what happened, no matter what obstacles he faced. He had incredible drive and ambition.
In a historic moment in 1996, facing his condition, a trembling Muhammad Ali lit the Olympic torch at the opening ceremony of the Atlanta Olympics, touching the hearts of millions around the world.
At that point in time, not only did the world rediscover Ali, but corporate America rediscovered Ali, and that it gave him financial security he hadn't had before, and educated a new generation of people as to, yeah, this is Muhammad Ali. Take a long, good look.
In 2005, Ali received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from George W. Bush, who referred to him as a fierce fighter and a man of peace. What a turnaround for the humble boy from Louisville, who was vilified for years.
I've had appointments with danger. I've sneered at doom. I've chuckled in the face of catastrophe. I've stood fearless in the hour of horror. I've gambled with the odds of fate.
But in 2016, he lost his final fight. After being hospitalized for a respiratory illness, he died from septic shock.
There was a big, showy funeral in Louisville, Kentucky, which was attended by dignitaries around the world. But the real tribute to Muhammad was in the hearts and minds of people. The fact that every newspaper in the world had tributes to Muhammad on page 1, that people really cared. Someone who had been very, very important in their lives had died.
He was adored by millions around the world who thought of him not only as the greatest boxer, but as a philanthropist and a fighter for social justice.
We can't do nothing and help people with our life and make life better, and then help your children and make a way for your people to live a name, make a name that's gonna live. Ain't no sense in being here.
Marie Curie, Evita Peron, Muhammad Ali. All 3 came from difficult backgrounds, but managed to become recognized worldwide for their achievements. Had they lived in our times, they might have used different digital platforms to deliver their messages and expand their reach. Marie Curie, with her extreme shyness and publicity phobia, would likely not have been involved with social networks herself.
I think other people might make social media for her as women came together and found ways to raise funds so that she could do the work that she did, and probably for the sole purpose of either educating or raising money to be able to continue the work.
Eva Peron was on the other side of the spectrum with her extroverted, artistic, and media-savvy personality, so she would surely have taken advantage of the digital platforms today.
She would use all of them. She would use the television, which she couldn't really use when she was alive. I think she would probably continue to use the radio. It has a very large reach to many sectors of the population, particularly the ones she's particularly interested in reaching out to. She will tweet, she will film YouTubes. So why restrict to some if you can use them all?
Muhammad Ali was perhaps the most astute of them all when it came to working the media. But would he use social media today?
Who knows what would have happened with Muhammad for social media? He was the perfect messenger for the 1960s. TV was the perfect medium for Ali. He was never technologically oriented. I'm not sure he would have been able to use Instagram, Facebook, any of those things. Somebody would have had to post for him. One of the extraordinary things about him was that he didn't just reflect the age in which he lived, he helped shape it.
Three legends who managed to break the mold. Three icons who broke barriers and entered into the select group of history's ultimate influencers.